Oops. Okay. Muy bien. Vamos a empezar. We got a few people on the road today. We were just saying, so vamos a empezar.
I'm here as an observer today. I just want to see.
Está bien, Linda. Bienvenida. We welcome you. Observe, participate, do whatever you like. Okay, bien. Wow, I came prepared with my watch, but maybe we're just going to keep this with a smaller group today, and that's fine. Está bien. I am assuming you want to keep going with all things past and more practice with that. Yeah, see?
Oh, yes.
Bien. And so because we've had a little bit of time off, I want to do the dip in the toe, ease back in kind of thing. So we have a few things planned. Ooh, let me reduce some of my screens and move some of my other screens over. And this is actually kind of a nice little review of what happens with the various past tenses. Okay, and he's going to do an extremely general review. Then we'll do something a little more specific, and then we'll get a story, and then we're going to dive into let's use some ideas. So, okay. Pueden ver, can you see this young man?
Yes.
Uy, es guapo. Wow, he is a good-looking young man. Okay, so
Preterit and imperfect tenses in Spanish. Both of these are used to talk about things that happened in the past, but the differences can be kind of subtle and confusing.
Oh yeah, subtle and confusing. And here you see all the comparisons, which we're going to look at some charts of that as a refresher, reminder, warm-up. So we've got estar in the two tenses. We've got tener, we've got decir, we've got ir, we've got hacer. You know what? Sadly, a lot of the most common verbs, the most frequently used ones, wind up being in that ugly, difficult, irregular category thing for a lot of these tenses.
And can create misunderstandings sometimes. So in this video, I want to give you 2 stories plus 1 simple exercise to help you start to wrap your head around the differences between the two and when to use them. We're going to look at the stories first and then explain the grammar behind them. Unfortunately, the way that most people go about learning how to use these tenses is by memorizing a whole bunch of situations and a whole bunch of conjugations, and then
and that is what I had to do. Okay, but the context is really always king. It is what drives which one of those tenses you use, and it's better to get like a general form, because if you've heard estaba or estuve, it's not a big jump from estuve, I was in a place. It's not a big jump from estuve to estuvimos. That when you hear the most, it's a we. Okay, so it's not a big jump from that, but getting it from context is the most important.
Getting really stressed when they're trying to use it all in conversation with somebody else. Don't do that. My goal here is to give you a simple overview, help you get an idea for how this all works, and then it's up to you to go practice. That way, when you are speaking with somebody else, you can just sort of let the grammar happen in the background, not think about it too much, and let the words come out and just enjoy the fact that you're speaking Spanish. So first, picture a timeline of an afternoon of yours on vacation. Say you're at the beach. You spent the afternoon on the beach and somebody asks you, what did you do today? ¿Qué hiciste hoy? What did you do today? And you reply, estuve toda la tarde en la playa. I was on the beach for the whole afternoon, period. End of story. Didn't go into detail, talk about anything else that happened. In this case, we'll use the preterit, the simple past tense. Estuve, I was. Now
because you're talking about a pretty finite amount of time. Now, could you also use estaba? You could. Estuve just makes it kind of more final. Oh, it was just this afternoon. So, might they flip between those two? They might, because if in the person's mind speaking, they're thinking more in literally, if they're thinking in descriptive mode, they might reply just to you, estaba en la playa. I was on the beach, but estuve ¿Qué hiciste hoy? What did you do? Oh, because the question is in preterite. Oh, I'm going to put the answer back in preterite. I was at the beach and I'm thinking clearly just this afternoon. So I'm putting it in preterito. Yeah. So we got to take our clues from the context. And if the context clue is ¿Qué hiciste? What did you do? Esta tarde, this afternoon. Well, then that's putting it in the context of limiting it in time. ¿Qué hiciste? What did you do? So somebody is going to be likely in that context because the question is in preterite to reply back maybe with a preterite. And, then it's going to be a natural choice. Ask me in preterite. I'm going to respond with a preterite. Okay.
Let's take a different story, a different take on the same situation. Say you spent the afternoon on the beach, but this time you are telling somebody about your afternoon. A few more things are going on, a couple things interrupt what happened, and in general, there's just more to tell. In this case, we're going to mix up the two tenses. So you might start by saying, estaba en la playa y hacía mucho calor.
And now it's not just what did you do today? It's notice I was on the beach and it was really hot, and automatically now it's the intent of the speaker is I'm describing that. And because I'm describing, I'm going to go shoot straight off into the aba, ia, the imperfectos, because, I'm describing to you. So whatever tense comes out of that speaker's mouth is automatically signaling to you just give you the fact in a closed amount of time, preterito, or, I'm going to tell you what my afternoon was like. And now that's a description. And we naturally can slip into estaba en la playa y hacía mucho calor. All right. Because I am filling in those details. Okay.
Así que me metí al agua.
I got in the water. That's kind of more of it, very much an action, right? Not a description. I got in the water. Me metí means I put myself into, meaning I climbed into the water. I got into the water. Me metí. Me metí al agua is a way of saying I got in the water.
Estaba en el agua, pero tuve que salir porque el salvavidas vio un tiburón.
But I had to get out because the lifeguard vio un tiburón. We wouldn't naturally in English say the lifeguard was looking at a shark. No, the idea we want to convey is, the lifeguard saw a shark. Wow, un event, and boom, had to get out. Another event, but that event is tied to the vio un tiburón, saw a shark. Okay.
Así que estuve solo una media hora en el agua.
So I was only in the water for a half an hour. And because I'm saying only a half an hour, and I'm really defining a short period of time, estuve en el agua solamente media hora. Wow, I was just in the water for half an hour. I am giving it a very limited time span. So I flip into preterito because, the idea I'm conveying is, wow, 30 minutes. Boy, that was it because of the shark. Yeah. So this context is driving all these ideas.
We use the imperfect of these verbs. Estaba en la playa. I was on the beach. Hacía mucho calor. It was really hot.
Description.
To talk about the situation broadly, to set the scene.
Broadly.
We use the preterite in this case, me metí, tuve, vio, estuve, to describe things that came and went that sort of interrupted the scene. Tuve que salir. I had to get out the one time. El salvavidas vio. The lifeguard saw.
One time.
The once. Estuve una media hora en el agua. I was in the water for half an hour, a fixed time frame. Now let's look at a second scenario where you might have to choose between these two verb forms. Picture a timeline of your childhood this time. And imagine that you're telling a story about something that you used to do often. For example, cuando era niño, siempre estaba contento de ir a la playa.
And now, again, it's another story, but it's not just about an afternoon. It's about the habits or usual pattern when you were a kid. So repeated activities.
Íbamos todos los años y nos
Okay, we used to go every year, and we used to stay for a week. We would stay for a week, but it's what we used to do when we used to go. All right, so that's all linked into imperfecto. Íbamos todos los años y nos quedábamos una semana allí, and we would stay there for a week. So we really need imperfecto if I'm talking about this being something that we did as a habit during the summer, okay, as part of our vacation with the family, over and
quedábamos
over.
una semana allí. Pero una vez, cuando tenía 11 o 12
But one time when I was 10 or 11, but wait a minute, if it's one time when I was 10 or 11, yeah, but when we're describing age has to have tenía for the past, okay, because age is description. And now he's going to talk about 1 year, which was a break from that usual habit.
12 años, hubo un huracán enorme y no pudimos ir.
1 year, there was a big hurricane, and that hurricane was an event. It happened 1 year. It happened one time. And this is something that, you know, if the hurricane came, the hurricane wasn't coming. Boom, a hurricane hit, right? Un evento. Hubo un huracán. Hubo is the pretérito, the preterit of haber. Usually, more frequently, you hear haber in the past as the imperfecto form había. Había, the form of haber in imperfecto, is probably more frequently used. But if we've got a weather event like un huracán, and now it's something that happened. That hurricane, it happened. Okay, it's an event. So we have hubo un huracán enorme. There was a great big huge hurricane. Y no pudimos ir. We weren't able to go. We did not manage to get out because, wow, they closed the beach for sure.
Me sentí muy decepcionado.
Wow. I was, and decepcionado does not mean deceived. It's disappointed. It's not deception. Decepcionado es disappointed. Wow, I felt disappointed that one time. Oh man, what a drag that was. Me sentí muy decepcionado.
We use the imperfect in this scenario, era, estaba, íbamos, and so on, to talk about the things that we used to do with some regularity or that used to happen regularly. Basically, stuff that happened repeatedly in the past. Cuando era niño, when I was a kid, broadly, siempre estaba, I was always, íbamos todos los años, we would go or we used to go every year. But we use the preterit to talk about things that came and kind of interrupted the normal sequence of events. Hubo un huracán, there was a hurricane. No pudimos ir, we couldn't go. Me sentí decepcionado, I felt disappointed. These are all things that interrupted the normal sequence. There was one hurricane, we couldn't go the once, and I felt disappointed the once. Now, these two stories are just an overview of this broad concept that you're going to come across over and over in Spanish, if you haven't already. And right now, you might feel a little bit overwhelmed by all the stuff that it seems like there is to know about it. One thing to know is that as you go, the more you listen to Spanish and are surrounded by it, you'll develop more of an intuition for when to use one versus the other, and you won't have to think about it really consciously. Instead, it'll just be automatic. And the first step towards actually being able to use this in an automatic way is to practice. Practice on your own without the pressure of having somebody else in front of you. Create a story of your own, 1 to 2 sentences long, about something that happened yesterday or last week, or something that you did repeatedly in the past.
And we're kind of going to do that with some guided practice later on, okay?
Leave your story in the comments and I'll be happy to provide feedback on it. Then, over the course of the next week, start to incorporate this into your Spanish routine. Maybe you're driving to work or going for a walk. You can tell yourself a story each day about something that happened that day or the day before. a very simple story, don't overcomplicate it at the beginning. 1 to 2 sentences about how you were eating breakfast and then the cat jumped on the table, or anything really. Then with some practice under your belt, you will start to feel a little bit more confident about which one of these verbs you can choose. And then the key is when you're actually speaking with somebody to forget everything that you learned and just speak. Like I mentioned.
Okay, that's the hard part. Oh, forget that you just did that and just start to speak. Okay, that takes a little bit of time to actually be able to do that. But here's what I would like you to kind of think about, and I think he's right. It's like you just got done learning a lot of these forms, and the barrier for the normal person, or even the exceptional person, as you are all exceptional, when you're learning these things is, boy, that challenge of learning all those conjugations and then, ooh, wow, estar is very irregular for preterito, but it's very irregular for preterito, but very regular for imperfecto. Wait a minute, why? Yeah, why am I? It's a memorization thing. It is, but it's getting used to those conjugation patterns. So our first foray into the past, going from English to Spanish, is very, very challenging because that first speed bump is like, I need to know these conjugations. Well, you should be able to recognize at least some of those conjugations. So that's speed bump number 1. But how I like to look at it as you go further into it, where he said, don't think about it so much. And that's like, dude, sorry, I'm going to be thinking about this. This is how people feel. Right. I'm not going to think about it. No, my brain is churning with the dumb little chart and da. Okay. But here's the thing. I think there's a good analogy I can give you. Here's how you should feel. And this is a listening thing. It's not a thing putting pressure on you to speak yet. Because the ability to speak and get the right tense out is a skill that does take time and practice. But the way you can prepare yourself to eventually do that, because you might not be able to do it right now, is imagine that you're like a person at a great big fair or a great big circus, a great big event, a mass of people. You know how sometimes with a mass of people, you're kind of sardined in there and you're just moving with the crowd. And that's how you should let yourself go along when you're listening to people telling stories in the past. Let yourself be carried along in the throng of the crowd uncontrollably as you listen to a story in the past. But pay attention to, as the person is telling me the story, they are using preterit or imperfect. They are using just mental note. They're using event. They're using description. Make a mental note of that, because you will start to make a mental note of the patterns. And what I always liked as a kid when I started to get used to talking in the past was that when I read a story or heard a story, I could immediately tell from the tense the person chose to use. If they were saying timeline, event, or if they were describing their choice of using preterito or the choice to use imperfecto, told me immediately if they were going into description mode or boom, 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 boom happening. So that's the feeling I want you to start to try to go with. Try to be in the crowd, the sardine in the massive crowd, moving along with that and just paying attention to that. That's enough for now. Believe it or not, that's enough. Just start to notice And you'll start to, because it begins to paint a picture in your brain of happening versus, ooh, it's a great big long description. All right. Let's move from that into a concrete little story. So you'll hear an example. Un ejemplo. And here I'm not going to stop her too much. I'm going to let her tell her story. Speaking about your day, and we're going to let her go. Oh, I'm trying to decide. I think I need closed captions, but I'm not sure. If I might turn the closed captions off if she puts them up. Okay, now we're going to see a concrete example. Again, so we can kind of get used to it. Okay.
How do you reply when a friend, a spouse, or your pareja
Your partner
asks, ¿y qué tal estuvo tu día?
How was your day? And, oh, look, ¿qué tal estuvo tu día? Not estaba, but estuvo. And you automatically know because in the question, they want you to say, hey, what went on? They want you to tell the events. Yeah. I went in the office. I found orders on my desk. I called customers. They want you to sequence. Tell me the sequence of your day. Okay, bien. But you may have to sprinkle some feelings or descriptions along with those events. You may have to sprinkle the two. So let's see what she does.
No idea? Well, I, Maria Fernanda, Spring Spanish teacher, will show you today how you can speak about your day in perfect Spanish. So let's take a look. Here are some examples of chunks you can use when describing your morning activities. I will use a full sentence in Spanish as an example from my video, Mi Rutina Diaria. By the way, in that video, I spoke in present tense, whereas in this video, I will show you how to talk about your day in past tense using those scenes as examples. En la mañana me levanté sobre las 7 de la mañana y después me tomé una taza de café. Enseguida tomé una ducha y me lavé los dientes. Después me vestí para irme al trabajo.
And notice these are all sequences. If something happened
This
after
clip is
something
from the
else.
video I told you about where I speak about mi rutina diaria fully in Spanish. So if you want to check that out as well, you can click right here. When you talk with someone about your morning, you usually speak in a past tense. Here are some extra chunks you can use right away. Me desperté, me afeité, me maquillé,
Yay.
leí las noticias, me quedé atascado en el tráfico,
Ooh, I got stuck. Yeah, I got stuck.
tuve que correr para tomar el autobús.
Had to run to catch the bus.
For even more useful Spanish chunks you can use in conversations right away, make sure to download and print out, if you want, our free Essential Spanish Chunking Kit. The link is in the description. By the way, as a cultural fact, in some parts of Mexico, Spain, and Latin America, work schedules have a 2-hour break for lunchtime, around 2 to 4 p.m., more or less. Therefore, we consider afternoon activities from 12 to 6 p.m. Let's say you met someone at night and you want to talk about what do you do this afternoon. Por la tarde, después de mi trabajo, regresé a casa para comer. Y sobre las 4 de la tarde, comencé a dar clases en línea. A las 7 de la noche me dio hambre e hice mi cena. More useful chunks to talk about your afternoon activities are: hice la comida, almorcé pasta, fui al súper, preparé algo para picar,
Picar is eat a snack.
Tomé clases de piano. Estudié español con los videos de Spring Spanish. By the way, at the end, we will put all these chunks together in a conversation between a married couple. Finalmente, it is nighttime, and you also have your own activities. I usually like nights para relajarme y descansar, but some people are more active at night or prefer to go out for a bite. In this case, let's see my example and complement it with some additional chunks. Por la noche, preparé mi cena y me puse a ver Netflix. Y como estaba cansada, me
Oh, and notice now she flipped to I was feeling tired, a description.
dormí temprano. And if you are more active at night, maybe the following chunks will help. Salí a cenar con mis amigos. Me fui de fiesta. Fui a tomar unas cervezas. To be honest, all the activities mentioned above, it's something I would say maybe to talk about what I did over the weekend. So let's imagine it is the start of the week, the beautiful lunes that a lot of people hate.
I hate Mondays. Hate them.
And you're at work and somebody just asked you, ¿Cómo estuvo tu fin de semana?
How was your weekend?
And you could reply something like, tuve un excelente fin de semana, fui al cine con mi familia y salí a cenar con mis amigos. El sábado por la noche me fui a bailar y terminé como a las 4 de la mañana. Estuvo muy divertido. If you prefer not telling too much information, then you can reply with a simple, estuvo muy bueno. Me la pasé genial. He tenido mejores.
I've had better.
Or you can be more specific by saying, what do you do? For example, fui al cine con mi pareja. Fui a comer a un restaurante italiano. Nos fuimos a pasear por la ciudad. Salimos de road trip.
Road trip. Wow. Inglés.
Nos metimos a la piscina.
We got into the pool.
Now, let's
Yeah.
put all together in the following example. Hola, amor, ¿cómo estuvo tu día? Ay, amor, pues, ¿por dónde empiezo? Por la mañana me fui temprano para irme al trabajo. Entonces, no desayuné nada. Y no hice la cama porque tú seguías dormido.
Oh, and notice this. This is interesting. No hice la cama. I didn't make the bed because here's what was going on in the background before I even thought about making the bed or not. Seguías, you continued, you kept on. Seguías dormido means you kept on being asleep, meaning you were plopped in bed before I thought about, should I make the bed or not? Ooh, then I saw, you were still sacked out in bed. And I decided, nope, not going to make the bed because you're still the big lump on the other side of the bed. Okay. So that seguías has got to be imperfecto because it was going on before I made that decision. When I made that decision, after I made that decision, he's still sleeping in the bed. Okay. Bien. So that seguías is much better as imperfecto because it is what was going on in the background while I was making this decision, running around doing my stuff in the morning. Okay, so hice la cama, no, or in this case, a negative, no hice la cama, I didn't make the bed, is a one-time thing. But hubby was asleep, hubby was still asleep. Ooh, I left and hubby was still asleep. He was out. So that part of it needs to be imperfecto. It's background action.
Después tuve que correr para tomar el autobús porque
Wow.
pasó más temprano de lo habitual.
Oh, it came by earlier than it usually
¿Y
does.
qué pasó? ¿Lo alcanzaste?
Did you catch it? The bus?
Sí, logré llegar al trabajo a tiempo.
Yeah, I got to
Y
work
por la
early.
tarde, a la hora de la comida, olvidé prepararme algo para picar. Entonces compré un sándwich en la tienda de la esquina. ¿Qué tal? ¿Estaba bueno?
There's a description.
Bueno, pues no, pero era la única opción.
It was the only thing I
Después del
had to eat.
trabajo, estudié un poco de español con los videos de Spring Spanish. Y finalmente me fui a tomar unas cervezas con mis amigas. ¡Wow! Parece que fue un gran día, ¿eh? Ahora, ¿qué te parece si cenamos? Vale, ¿me ayudas a preparar la cena? Así terminamos más rápido. Vale, con gusto. Dale, vamos. After you have talked about your day, you need to know what to talk about next. In the next part of this.
Okay, and that is it for now. But that, I will send you the link for that. Vale la pena. It's very, very much worth the effort to go back and listen to that again and let yourself be the sardine and the great big throng of the crowd and just get carried away with and just notice, description versus what I did, description versus what I did. And this is a very good way to really think of the more you hear those patterns, the more likely you are to be able to repeat that pattern when you finally feel ready to come up with your own descriptions. Okay. And don't feel inadequate, good God, no, or like you're bad at it if that takes time, because it does take time and it is not something that you can just make happen now. Okay. It is very, very necessary to hear lots of examples. For a very long time, when I saw kids in a classroom 5 days a week, when they started studying preterit, which was usually around October, by the end of the year, they're like, yeah, I kind of have that idea, but this is hard. But they were listening for months and months to examples. And then when they came back the next year, this is not an exaggeration, 5 days a week, when they come back for the next year, they start to say, oh, I'm hearing more examples. And they started to be able to do it. It took them almost a year to be able to do that. And that was a natural and normal progression. They weren't speaking 24/7 all day long, just 1 hour a day, right? 5 hours a week with me. And that's a natural progression of how that it is a process. Learning the past is a process. And getting lots of input, the theory of the more input, meaning the more listening to stories that you do, the more it will start to sink in, will happen. But you have to let that be a process, and you have to let it take however long it takes for your brain, for that light to go on. Because the past is a very daunting thing. It just is, okay? It is very, very normal. So now the problem becomes, we've got all these conjugations. We're going to take a quick look at just some charts of some common verbs. And we're not going to listen to this whole video. I'll send you the link for it, but we'll just take a look so that we kind of review. These are verbs you hear all the time, high frequency, repeated verbs, and what they'll look like going from present to preterit to imperfect, just so you kind of get an idea of, oh, this is what these verbs look like in these other tenses. Okay. And then we're going to get into some practice. So first, we're going to kind of fast forward into just checking out some charts. Oh, for ser, to be. You know the I am, soy, eres, somos, son, but we've either get, this is the odd one that it shares with ir. Ir and ser share the exact same preterit chart of verbs. That is funky and weird. But okay. Fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fueron. You are more likely to hear that bottom tier imperfecto. You are more likely, because you are more likely to hear people talking about their day, describing what was going on. So you're more likely to hear ser more frequently in imperfecto, era, eras, era. And eras, era, éramos, eran sure doesn't look like soy, eres, es, right? But if you start to get that chunk of just era in there, it's not a big jump from era to éramos. Oh, it's a we. Or from era to eran. They were. Okay. It's not that you'll never hear these fui, fuiste, fue verbs for ser, but you're probably more likely to hear ser in imperfecto. Okay, so that is a chunk. Let's move on to our next chart, which is going to be estar, high frequency, uy, momentito, high frequency verb. And we'll leave that last one off because we just have to stop it. So estoy, estás, está, wow, that's kids play, right? But we've got preterit, right? Estuve, they're all based on that estuve form. This is very, very irregular again, because the high frequency verbs tend to be regular verbs, sadly. So preterito, estuve, estuviste, estuvo, estuvimos, estuvieron, but imperfecto. And you know what? You're likely in an average chat to hear this particular verb. You're likely to hear it a whole lot in imperfecto, because quite often we talk about where stuff was or where somebody was, and we're maybe not limiting it to time. If we're limiting it to time, a time frame, then that preterito chart will take over. But if we're just describing with no time limitation, that imperfecto chart is going to take over a lot of the time. Estaba, estabas, estaba, estábamos, estaban. And estar, oddly, is regular for imperfecto, where ser is not. Estar is very regular for imperfecto. Let's take a look at our next high frequency verb, tener, because tener is something that we use every day, all the time, a lot. And again, with tener, you're very, very likely to hear this imperfecto, a great big in the Venn diagram of what percentage do we use this tense. That imperfecto is going to fill a lot of the Venn diagram of high frequency, right? Tenía, tenías, tenía, teníamos, tenían. Regular, regular for imperfecto, because most verbs are regular in imperfecto. If somebody flips tener into preterito, it starts to get a very specific meaning of limited to time, or somebody got or received. Tener is one of those kind of odd verbs that has some real limitations in its definition. Preterite and imperfect, defining a little more precisely what you mean, limiting more precisely what you can mean with tener, right? Usually if we're just talking about what somebody owned, possessed, as had, we're going to use that imperfecto. All right. Preterito with the tuve has got to be a received meaning, because it's an event, or it's going to be maybe I had to do something at a specific time, where we're limiting the time, and therefore it flips into preterito. But you're going to hear tener way more in imperfecto. Okay. So far the way this is going, this one we're going to look a little bit differently at. Now we've got ir, that high frequency verb ir. Here, I think, en mi opinión, para mí, for me, you're going to hear ir more in preterito than you do in imperfecto. In an average conversation, in the big Venn diagram, the percentage, you're going to hear ir more in preterito, because usually when we talk about somebody went, we're talking about events. Okay. It's only going to flip into imperfecto in two categories, in two situations. One is for habit, like that example you had with, we used to go to the beach, íbamos a la playa. Okay, we've got to use imperfecto, íbamos, and here's one of the few irregulars with imperfecto, iba, ibas, iba, íbamos, iban. We use ir in imperfecto for habit, And we use it to say that somebody was going to do something. He was going to go to work, but his car wouldn't start. I was going to cook dinner, but the electricity cut out. Yeah. I was going to work on my hobby, but some other event interrupted me. Okay. Then you're going to hear ir in imperfecto, but most of the time we're talking about ir as somebody went. So a higher percentage is going to fly into this preterito category with this particular verb, because usually we're talking about where somebody went to. And then it's going to be this very odd, very irregular, all beginning with F categories, right? Fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fueron. Yes, ir shares preterito with ser. But you know from context, if it's ir or ser, you just do, because it's fui a, I went to. Fui a. Nobody says fui a secretaria. I was a secretary. Fui a secretaria. No, nobody says that. Fui al centro. I went downtown. You'll know from context if fui means I was or I went. You'll know. You'll know. The context is going to tell you, right? Venir, 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 venir. Wow. Venir again in the past. Venir to come, to come. This is what it looks like. And this is a high frequency verb. To come, venir, is irregular in preterito, but is very regular in imperfecto. But if you look at the big picture, general conversation, you talk about somebody came to a place, that's usually an event. So you're going to hear venir more in preterito. You're only going to hear imperfecto if it's somebody was coming or somebody used to come at this time. And probably just higher percentage use of preterito for that particular verb because of what it means. Okay. You know, of course, these verbs all have conjugations in all of these tenses, but we have to think of the context. Volver, to return, to come back. Okay. Usually that's an event. Somebody came to a place, they came back. You're going to hear this more in preterito. Volví, volviste, volvió, volvimos, volvieron. We're only going to use imperfecto if we're talking about a repeated pattern. Okay. That somebody was returning, was coming back. That's not as frequently said as, oh, he came back at 5. He came back late. He came back early. So preterito for this particular verb is probably what you're going to hear more. Okay. A ver. Now we've got llegar. Llegar is to arrive or to get to a place. And because the nature of that activity, arrive, is very event oriented, okay, you're going to hear it more in preterito. You're going to hear llegué, llegaste, llegó, llegamos, llegaron more than you hear the imperfecto. He was arriving. You don't, or he used to arrive. Okay, hey, that flight used to come in at 8 o'clock, but they changed the schedule. All right, now, llegaba a las 8, it used to arrive, because you're talking about a habit. But that's not as frequent in a conversation as going into preterito. It came, it arrived. I got there, llegué. Okay, the nature of the verb is going to determine, in this case, which of those two tenses is more likely, more frequent in general. Okay, these are all in general. Salir, again, is a very event-oriented verb. Salir, to go out or to leave. It's very event-oriented. So you're going to hear way more of salir in preterito. Salí, saliste, salió, salimos, salieron, right? Because it's more event-oriented. You're going to hear salir in imperfecto when we talk about a repeated event, okay? Por ejemplo, here is a very likely used for salía, imperfecto. Salir can mean to go out with. So it's the dating verb. Okay. Mi hija salía con un buen chico. My daughter was going out with a nice boy. Yeah. She was dating him. And I'm just saying, oh, well, I don't know how long. They did it. They went out a lot. Wow. Those two, they went out a lot. And now if I'm talking about that repeated habit, that they were doing it for quite a few months, few weeks, now imperfecto is appropriate. But if I want to say that my daughter went out last night with some guy, yeah, mi hija salió anoche con un chico nuevo, some new guy. Yeah, she went out last night. All right, so our context is going to determine what we do with that. Let's see what our next type. Oh, here's our very high frequency word, verb querer. Querer, to want. Querer is very irregular in preterito, but it is very specific. It changes meaning somewhat in preterito. You will hear it less in preterito, and you will hear it way, way, way more in imperfecto. Because what does querer mean? It doesn't mean like salir, went out, or like llegar, arrived, came in. Querer means wanted. When does wanted fit into began and ended? Not very neatly. Okay. So when we talk about somebody wanted or they didn't want, like, no kidding, 90% of the time, it's going to fall into that imperfecto. This particular verb, querer, because it talks about feelings, your emotional stance on something, whether or not you wanted it, cannot be easily defined with a time dimension as a general rule. Most of the time it's not. So it's going to flip into imperfecto. You're going to hear querer way more in imperfecto, flat out, way more in imperfecto than in preterito. All right. The way you're going to likely to hear it more, no quiso salir. He refused to go out. He refused to leave. Querer for preterito, especially if it's negative, means refused. Didn't want to, as in not going to happen. Not talking about his general feeling. So you're going to hear querer way more in imperfecto. And poder, muy importante, really important verb, poder, to be able to, okay, and this one kind of does double duty, okay, poder, muy irregular in preterito, very irregular in preterit, but muy regular en imperfecto, okay? You're likely to hear poder probably more in imperfecto because usually we're talking about somebody was able to do. Poder in preterito starts to kind of mention that somebody actually got that done, or wow, did not manage to get something done. Okay, whatever the action of the second verb is. But poder in imperfecto just talks about whether or not somebody had the ability, whether or not they could theoretically do it. Okay. So I think, well, yeah, you will hear it in preterito, but in preterito, it's going to really kind of peg whether or not that activity from that second verb really, really happened. Saber, also as a frequently used verb. Saber is very, very specific. Again, saber is a mental activity, right? To know. So when we plug it into imperfecto, we're just talking in general about what somebody knew. You will hear it way more in imperfecto, what somebody knew or what somebody didn't know. Saber in the very regular form for imperfecto, sabía, 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 sabíamos, sabían, is what somebody did or did not know. A mental activity is hard to put into a box and say it started and now it ended. And when we do put it into that mental box with preterito, the very irregular supe forms, we're now saying it happened. Oh, that somebody found out. Saber in preterito gets a very special meaning. Saber in preterito means found out. And you are far more likely to talk about in a regular conversation what somebody knew, therefore imperfecto, versus what somebody found out, which happened at a specific time, what you found out, and it's therefore preterit. Okay. Last verb here, si es el último. ¿Es el último? Sí, es el último. Okay. Last one we'll talk about, then we're going to go straight for our little examples here. Llevar. Llevar has many, 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 many meanings. Yikes. Llevar can mean to wear clothes, but more frequently, llevar is used to say that you're picking something up and carrying it and taking it to some place. Llevar has a lot of meanings, but one of the very common meanings is llevar is that you're taking something and you're putting it in a different place. You're transporting something. You're moving it in space to a different place. I'm taking this up, boom. Or I take it with me and it comes along. Okay. So this one you're likely to hear really either way. It kind of depends on if it's an event or right. Or if it's a description. If it's a description, it'll be the imperfecto. If it's something you picked up and carried and moved over, okay, then preterito will work out. Yeah? Okay. Just so that you see those charts. Okay. A ver. Let's flip into some actual use here. We're going to go back to a situation that is comfortable because you just saw it Monday. A ver. You use these Monday to talk about what people are doing. Okay. We're going to take these and we're going to flip them into talking about the past. Four students went to school. What will be more natural? And I'm going to help you out a little bit with some forms here. What will be more natural? Fueron, iban. Oh, I need a space. That's why it looks funny. Cuatro estudiantes fueron a la escuela o cuatro estudiantes iban a la escuela.
Fueron.
Probably a little, yeah, if you're just going with flat out, here's what happened. Fueron. Cuatro estudiantes fueron a la escuela. Bien, okay. Let's look at caminar. Muy regular. Wow, that's a really super regular verb. Whatever you want to say, they walked to school.
Comieron.
Caminaron.
Caminaban.
Caminaron a la escuela. Caminaron a la escuela. Bien? Sí. Excelente. I'm trying to give myself a little space here to work with. Okay. Oh, I saw two buildings. Or you could say the kids saw two buildings. Anyway, ver. You can talk about I saw or they saw. I'm going to give you a choice. I need to give you a choice. Let's say the kids, see, los niños. Let's change it to los niños. Ay, inglés, no. Wow, bumped me out of my keyboard. Here we go. Otra vez. Okay. Los niños. Ay, todavía. Come on, keyboard. Got to get my ñ in there. Okay. Los niños It'll either be vieron or veían. Dos edificios. First day at school, let's say. The kids saw two buildings.
Vieron.
Vieron. Right. This is a very natural, muy natural. Vieron dos edificios. Okay. Let's take cruzar. The kids crossed the street.
Cruzaron.
Interesante. We could either use cruzaban or cruzaron.
Cruzaron.
This might depend. If it's just an event, they cross the street and they're done, then it's cruzaron. Okay. Let's look at maybe when it's not cruzaron. I can think of what's, let's look at the role of this human being with the little stop sign here. This little person is helping them cross the street, right? Yeah, little crossing guard. Yeah, that happens at school. Okay. What if the idea I want to, if the idea I want to convey is the kids cross the street? That's just an event. Los niños cruzaron la calle. Boom. Nada más. Nothing else. But what if the idea I want to get across is the kids were crossing the street when the lady helped out? Oh, when the lady stepped into the crosswalk. Oh.
Then it's imperfecto.
Oh, then it's imperfecto. So let's see how this idea may change. Los niños cruzaban la calle
Cuando
la mujer entró a trying to move my cuando la mujer entró para ayudarlos. When the lady came in to help them. So here's how to think about this. The idea I'm conveying is kids started to cross the street. Woo! Lady saw, here come a bunch of kids. In the middle of them walking across the street, oh, lady walks in with the great big stop sign. She's interrupting their little process of starting the march across the street. Boom, she comes out and came out to help them. And now they keep going, and now they keep going. Oh, that's how to think about that. Those two different tenses create a different idea of movement happening. Lady steps in, an event, different tense. The kids keep on marching across.
Do the tenses as they are stay the same if the cuando a la mujer entró para ayudarlos comes first? Do the tenses stay as they are?
Sí.
They
El orden. You're talking about the order.
see.
What if I change it so that we, a ver. So that it's this. Cuando la mujer entró para ayudarlos, los niños cruzaban la calle. Yes.
So the tenses remain as they were.
They do, whether we start with the cuando or we end with the cuando. And that cuando is kind of key.
Yeah.
That cuando is kind of key because we see when we say when, That word cuando is a context clue, and it is saying, uh-oh, interruption.
Okay.
Cuando is an interrupting word, and it's saying something's going to happen. And anything that happens is an event, and anything that's an event is preterito. Okay, so me flipping
Question.
around the order of that doesn't make that different. But let's say, instead of using cuando, let's say I give a different signal word. And these are all kind of time-oriented signal word. Let's say instead of cuando, I plug in a different signal, mientras. Mientras es while, ¿verdad? Right? Okay. But if I say, while this was going on, I've got two things, both doing this. Not this happening, boom, not that. This happening, boom, is cuando. This happening, ooh, that's mientras. Mientras is two things happening at the same time. And mientras is always, I'm going to change this around a little bit because it makes sense. Mientras la mujer ayudaba a los niños, ellos cruzaban la calle. Mientras la mujer ayudaba a los niños, while the lady was helping, ellos cruzaban la calle. They were crossing the street because of that word mientras. It is a signal word to say two things happening at the same time. But
So
the cuando,
it stays
Yeah.
imperfecto.
it stays imperfecto for the two because of this magic word mientras. Mientras means two things, but they're both moving along like this, a pace,
Okay.
same time. Cuando says interruption. Mientras does not.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
Question.
See,
With, in the beginning, I think we had Los Niños were crossing. Why wouldn't you use estaban, were? And then the I am form of crossing.
es buena pregunta. That is a very good question. Let's take this bad one out. Let's think about that. Could I say, and correct me if I am wrong after I type this in. Los niños estaban cruzando la calle. Is that what you
That's
meant?
how I would, that's what exactly what I meant.
Okay. Okay. Los niños estaban cruzando la calle. Legítimo, legitimate. Sure, you can say that. Estaban cruzando la calle. That gives it a very flowing feel because the job of progressive, and progressive means estar specifically with ando yendo, says, ooh, it's a rolling thing. Okay. And by taking estaban, I'm putting it in the past. Yes, you can do that. But I'm going to show you something. There is very little difference. There is very, very little difference. I won't say no difference whatsoever, but very little difference between saying estaban cruzando and cruzaban. There's not a huge difference between those two verbs. They both mean we're crossing.
Okay.
Estaban cruzando means we're crossing. Cruzaban also means we're crossing. In English, we would say we're crossing. They're both okay to use. The only difference is that estaban cruzando gives it a little more sense of movement. Wow, that's very abstract.
So how
That's
would
not
you
a grammar
say,
rule.
how would you say then they crossed? Indeed.
They crossed is just cruzaron.
Okay.
Cruzaron, they crossed, cruzaron la calle, they crossed the street.
Los niños cruzaron, they crossed the
Crossed the
street.
street, they did it, it's done. What you mean to convey with cruzaron la calle is they did it and it's over and it's done. What you mean to convey here is literally the English idea of they were doing it. In English, we use the words were doing it. We're crossing, we're driving, we're laughing, we're carrying their backpacks. We're not paying attention to what was going on. Okay, we're looking at the lady who had the stop sign. In English, we use the idea of we're doing something or used to do something. That's the equivalent of imperfecto.
Okay.
Okay, that is our best English idea that we say instead of imperfecto. So you kind of need to know more context, but if somebody just said out of context, cruzaban la calle, in English, I would have to say either they were crossing the street, it was going on, and I'm probably saying, ooh, there's some detail I'm leaving out. Something else was happening or something else interrupted. Or I would say, ooh, they used to cross the street. This is the way they always went to school, a habit. So it'll be one of those two. And without the context, just by itself in the isolation of cruzar en la calle, you don't know which one I mean. Yeah.
Mhm.
Eso es. That is it.
Okay.
So that's why I say it's good for you. The amount of input, the number of stories you listened to in the past, the input is the most important thing, because when you're the little sardine moving along with the crowd, just listening to the story, all you're doing is noting, oh, they use cruzaban. Maybe it's what they used to do every day. Or, oh, cruzaron. Oh, it's what they did that one time. All right. And when you're the little sardine in the great big throng of people moving around and just listening to it, you start to realize that the speaker telling you the story is driving the meaning of that story by choosing preterito, it happened, or by choosing imperfecto, it was going on, as background description. And that's why listening to as many past stories as you can becomes so important, because the context of the story helps you see whether they're describing, telling habit, a pattern, or event. Describing, pattern, feelings, all imperfecto, or event, preterito. And the only way to get a comfortable handle on that is to hear a lot of examples, because then it starts to click. It takes a while. It does. Okay, let's look at número dos. We're going to get rid of everything except, if what you mean, if the idea you want to say is the man read the label.
Leo.
Perfecto. Leyó. Okay, it's got a funny Y because it's a spelling thing, but it's still pronounced leyó. Leyó. El hombre leyó la etiqueta de la botella. If instead I want to give a lot of description, Like I want to say, well, I want to fill in more details about what this looked like when he was doing this activity. I might change it to leía la etiqueta cuando cuando vino su esposa. He was reading the label when his wife came. When his wife came in. Okay. And now he was reading. Oh, his wife walked up to him. There's an event. Okay. That's the difference, but the context drives it, you know, and some things are more likely than others. Let's look at the push the cart. Empujar es un verbo muy irregular. This is a very regular verb. You can count on it to be very regular. The man pushed the cart. If he just pushed the cart along, it would be
Empujó.
empujó. Empujó un carrito. He pushed a cart. Okay. But if I want to say he was pushing the cart along and, oh, then he saw that there was a long line at the checkout and he looked at his watch and he, oh, do I have time to do this? Now you've got a lot more context. Now he was pushing his cart along becomes what was happening when other things maybe were going on. El hombre empujaba un carrito cuando vio la cola muy larga en la caja. En la caja is at the checkout. Okay. Or en la cajera, because we're going to give her a name. En la cajera, ¿sí? En la cajera, en la cajera, ¿sí? El hombre empujaba el carrito cuando vio la cola muy larga en la cajera. The man was pushing his cart along when he saw, it got in the middle of him pushing that cart along when he saw a long line at the cashiers. Yeah. Oh, so you are likely in a story. People are going to flip between tenses to paint the picture differently, one way or the other. Okay. Paint a picture by choosing, I use this tense or I use this tense. And it's going to give you almost like a stop and freeze action if it's preterito, or it's going to give you I'm sitting here watching what's going on the background if they use imperfecto. ¿Entienden? That make a little more sense? And it's really, really, really necessary to get a lot of input. So I'm probably going to give you like 2 stories to listen to. Let's take a look at another one. And let's see if now you can do a little more to figure some out. Let's look at our single one with número 2. La foto. Sí, número 2. The man takes a picture. We're going to change it to the man took a picture.
One time event.
Tomó. El hombre tomó. ¿Por qué? Why?
One time event.
Yeah, he took a picture. He took a picture.
Would it also be a one-time event if you were saying he was taking pictures, as in over some period of time, over even a short period of time?
Yeah. If I mean a definite period of time, I will choose tomó. If even if I mean a long period of time, but definable, I will choose tomó. But the idea that it conveys, if I do this, el hombre tomaba una foto, is the man was taking a picture. And now probably I'm going to fill in some other information. Like, okay. Mientras, while, ponía el sol. The man was taking a photo while the sun was
Out or going
setting.
down? No?
The sun was coming down. The sun was setting. Oh. And now the feel I'm giving you by saying tomaba una foto, and probably not just one photo, tomaba, wow, probably tomaba fotos, right? He was taking lots of them because it was going on. El hombre tomaba fotos mientras ponía el sol. The man was taking pictures because he wanted, which one's going to be best? I don't know. I got to keep taking them. He was taking pictures while the sun was setting. And the feel I give you is different because now it's become kind of a rolling action. Yeah. Okay. Bien. So that gives you an idea. Let's take a look here. La primera foto, primera foto aquí, la mujer y el hombre, y tenemos mirar, mirar, mirar. We either need miraron, or we need miraban. The man and the woman looked at a beautiful view.
Miraron is looked.
Miraron would give it a definite ending. What if the idea I wanted to convey was they were looking at the scenery? Then I would choose miraban. That might be in either choice. It depends on kind of the idea I want to convey to you. And I'm going to make that choice depending on if the idea I mean is miraban, they were looking, or miraron, they looked at, and then they walked away.
So it's at estaban again, it's like they could have used that again.
Okay. Sí es posible. Yes, it is possible. I could say ellos estaban mirando. Sí, la vista.
Okay.
Estaban mirando la vista. And I give it a very fluid, flowing feel. That's not something you can fit into a grammar description, but you're giving it a very flowing feel by expressing it that way.
But it's still a proper way to.
It's a proper way, depending on what you mean.
Okay.
If you mean they were out there a really long time, and I don't know how long, but it was a while. Okay. What's correct? What's correct is what you mean. It's the idea you want to give.
But it's not that different from miraban, right? Or
estaba mirando is almost
same.
exactly the same idea as miraban.
Okay. Yes.
They're pretty equivalent.
Okay, that's what I want.
Pretty equivalent.
That actually really helps me. So that
Okay.
With the were ahead of it.
Yeah. Now, having said that, that can become kind of a crutch in a way, because you know what? To the English mind, and I'm going to say this, this is a specific English thing. To the native English speaker, oh my God, it's way less exhausting to say estaba mirando.
Okay.
I don't have to think, is that a regular verb? Is that an irregular verb? Oh my God, do I put it? Yeah, I pick estaban and mirando. It is less exhausting, isn't it?
See,
Okay. But here's the fact. The fact is, when somebody else who's a native speaker is talking to you, they're very, very likely to pick miraban or miraron.
Okay.
Okay. And that's what's going to come at you like the Mack truck. Yeah. Because they're going to say it fast. Oh, miraron la vista, sí, toda la tarde. Okay. So yeah, that's what they're going to choose to use. Okay. Let's look at the sentarse, because I like the sentarse. Se sientan en la cobija. They're sitting on the blankie. Okay, on that blanket, on that covering. Let's take sentarse and let's think of, will we say, se sentaron en la cobija or se sentaban en la cobija? Let's look at just this. We have a choice. ¿Se sentaron en la cobija o se sentaban en la cobija? Is there one that's right?
no,
I think they're
No.
both
they're
right.
both
Yeah.
right.
They're both right. Okay, but how is the se sentaron different from the se sentaban? What feel is different? Se sentaron is preterit, se sentaban is imperfecto.
If they sat on the blanket at that time, one time, and nothing else happened, they sat there. They sat.
If they just sat down, if they sat down. If we include that idea down, they sat down, then
Okay.
then se sentaron is more correct. If the idea you want to convey is they sat down, then the correct idea is to use se sentaron.
As part of an
Pretérito.
event, as a part of one of the
Sí.
sequence of events.
They sat down, their tushes were there on the ground, and that's where okay. But what if I wanted to say they were seated? They were seated on a nice blanket.
Sentaban.
Then se sentaban. Yeah. Se sentaban would mean they were sitting. They were sitting. They were seated. Se sentaban. And now I'm really describing the state they were in like, kind of like it's the background set of a movie. You're watching it in a movie. They were sitting on the blanket. He reached over to kiss her. They toasted in the wine glass. Yeah, that kind of thing, right? I'm just telling where they were, and now something else is going to happen. So, se sentaban en la cobija. If you say that to somebody, they're going to say, and then what happened? Because you're setting it up. You're setting the scene. You're setting the scene by saying, se sentaban en la cobija. And now somebody's saying, and what's next? Right? Whereas, se sentaron en la cobija.
They sat down.
Okay, they sat down. Yeah. And yeah, maybe you'll listen for another event, but se sentaban en la cobija. Ooh, somebody expects more to be happening now. After that, okay, entienden? That give you a better feel.
Better.
That's good.
Yeah, okay, bien. This is the past is a thorny thing, but input more stories, the better off you are. I'm going to give you 2 stories. I've got one picked out. I still have to decide on a second one. But I want you to listen for those patterns and let yourself be carried away by the story. And probably you want to listen to each story at least. Yeah, that many times. Yeah. Go for big idea first. Then go for maybe, noticing change, and then really go for that deeper meaning. And the more you listen to stories, the better it will be. But what I'm ideally looking is for 2 stories that are each about 10 minutes long. See? Bien?
Sí.
Okay?
Sí.
Vale?
Marilyn, you're going to send us that video that you had kind of stepped through with where on those, like, I don't know,
Sí.
eight verbs or so, where it showed all those
Sí.
tenses at one shot.
Yeah. Yeah. And the one where it showed all the charts, she's got a very long thing. I think she does it most all in Spanish. You may just want to use it as a refresher to, oh, these are verbs that are used a lot. They're high frequency words. And, you know, if you don't want to listen to her explanation of them all, it's very useful just for having, oh, here are all these charts together and they're high and you can feel comfortable. These are high frequency words that people use a lot in everyday conversation. Not I am reading Don Quixote or I'm reading Shakespeare or I'm reading, no, it's like everyday kind of stuff. I will send you all those links. Sí, exacto. Okay, bien?
See?
Very good.
Bien, fantástico. Okay. Entonces, wow, I bet you didn't think you're going to look at the same pictures, but it was a good time because it's timely. You got it in your brain already. Yeah. And we're just making that segue. Okay. Bien. Entonces, nos vemos, ¿no? Sí.
See?
Bien.
Gracias.
Excelente.
Gracias.
De nada, de nada. Es un placer. It is a pleasure. Como siempre.